Hey everyone, welcome to Proof of News. I am Whit Gibbs here with my co-host Ethan Vera. Ethan, how you doing, man?
Good. What's going on, Whit?
It's a beautiful day or evening now. I feel like we need some like news lead-in music, even though we're recording this and I know it's gonna get edited. I feel like maybe I should have like I don't know, like the soundtrack to Anchorman playing when we start the show.
Yeah, I mean, you could just spit a rhyme too. That mic's looking pretty tempting there.
That's the last thing that anyone wants is for me to try to rap. Yeah, that's not a good idea. Getting right into it. Oh, actually, you know what? Before we get into it, happy belated birthday, man.
Thanks, buddy. Now are you gonna sing me a
Yeah,
happy birthday intro?
I'm not. I don't understand why. I'm not musically inclined. I don't. Rapping and singing are just two things that I don't do. It's nice you got like you got all cleaned up for your birthday. I remember when I turned 21. It's good times. Oh man. Okay, dude. Well, let's get into this. I know you have planned an awesome show. And for those of you who don't know, I can only take so much credit for what goes into Proof of News. The guy Ethan puts together a pretty mean script for this thing. So we cover some of the best news that has happened over the course of the week in mining and in Bitcoin. And today's show is particularly exciting. There's always a lot of great news in mining. We're going to kick it off today with a story about TSMC and QXIC. Ethan, what's the word?
This story touches on everything from manufacturing to geopolitics, so quite fascinating, really. It just got released that QXIC and another chip manufacturer in China, HSMC, have been poaching some chip guys from TSMC over the past year or so. Uh, and so they're quickly racing to get their own capabilities in developing these chips onshore, onshore being mainland China. And so they're going to try and cut their ties to foreign chip suppliers, which I think goes along the themes of today's geopolitics, right? You can't really rely too much on foreign providers, especially in a industry where this technology is like vital to the success of a country long term. Maybe 1,000 years ago, the most protected industry was food. In the next 500, maybe it's chips.
Well, I know that Taiwan and TSMC in particular, they've cornered the market, right? And I mean, and for the world, not like it's just to China. They are a huge supplier of these chips for almost every major company out there. This move is really interesting. There is this anti-globalist movement, I guess you could say, where like the 90s and 2000s were spent like making the world one big marketplace, right? Where everyone could work well together and everything would operate in harmony. And all it did was create like these big oligarchies. And now it's all working backwards. Now that's proven to be a failed experiment. So, how do you think this is going to shake out for these guys?
I don't know necessarily if it was a failed experiment versus we're moving, I think, in the opposite direction of where we should be as a civilization. I mean, both you and I, we work with so many different Chinese companies. Like, I don't want to have to
Mm.
break ties with Chinese companies. I have a lot of friends there and a lot of good business guys there. I think like the we're heading in a bad direction here. It's it's a game, right, that Trump's playing right now, and he's really forcing it into
Yes.
this sphere. So maybe there's short-term pain for long-term gain, kind of like you could say the opium wars, but
Okay. So when it comes to the politics of this, right, I can understand the benefit of sending some things overseas for manufacturing. When I say it's a failed experiment, I think that the deals that were made in NAFTA and that era, they started, in my opinion, right? And one person, one opinion, it started the decline of what America was really good at. Like American manufacturing meant something. There were a ton of great jobs, and Canada too lost a lot of jobs to China. Um, but it started this wave that led to I mean really everything being made outside of the United States. And now I think coronavirus was a great example of like when we needed things that, were necessary for the prevention of the spread of COVID, we didn't have anybody to make them. Like we had to wait on them to come from other places because we've sent all of those factory jobs elsewhere. And, it's like with everything, you reap what you sow. It just tends to happen much later. And I don't know. I do think it's an overcorrection, right? Because that's how everything works. Like anytime something goes wrong, generally there's an overcorrection. And I think that's what we're seeing with Trump and how he's handling the China situation. And probably the response from China will be a disproportionate overcorrection in the other direction. So I don't know. It's shaping up to be very interesting.
Yeah, those are good points, and you can make an argument that chip production is going to be one of those vital sectors, kind of like masks or water, or one of those staples in society where you can't risk reliance on a single entity in, say, Taiwan. You need to have it at home. Mm-hmm. China's still catching up, so they're still around like the 14 to 12 nanometer chip process, which is about 3 generations behind TSMC, but I think if they continue to pour resources in, they could catch up eventually. Who knows if that's 5 to 10 years from now, but I think they're heading down the right path. So the question is US going to follow and going to take a similar route? And can they catch up, locally with not just a TSMC factory, but an American company building these chips?
Yeah, and it's a good point that you make. Obviously, the TSMC factory in Arizona is set to open in the next year, 6 months, something like that. And then they'll continue to scale for quite a while. And that move was clearly to bring those capabilities in within the United States. The one thing that is striking to me, and actually seems to be kind of a positive, is, with the situation in Hong Kong, China was very quick to go in and take over is a strong word, but assert dominance on the situation in Hong Kong. And a lot of people assume that it would have happened the same way in Taiwan, right? I don't have firsthand knowledge or experience of this, but there's definitely close political ties between those two, and not in a favorable way when it comes to Taiwan and China. So I think that this move of, Chinese companies trying to take some of the engineers from TSMC and bring them into China is actually a better way of doing it than the government intervening and potentially stepping in and taking a more harsh action in Taiwan. So might end up being kind of a silver lining to the whole thing.
That's a good take. Maybe China realizes that Taiwan is not going to be taken over in the next 20 to 30 years. So having a reality where TSMC is part of China, that's not going to happen. So let's just take the engineers instead. And like you said, that's better for everyone. The last thing we want is a war breaking out here. Obviously a very sensitive issue, and everyone's very opinionated on this, but I think we can all agree that we don't want a war between the two countries.
True. Yeah. Speaking of war, Bitmain. No, look, there's some really positive news about Bitmain this week, and we'll get to that in a second. But actually, I guess we could start with a bit of validation, right? There is some news involving Bitmain and TSMC. Why don't you share what that is?
Yeah, we've been talking negative about Bitmain for 3 weeks now, so finally something good is out. TSMC is in chip production for the 5 nanometer, and that's coming out shortly. They released a short list of companies that will have access to it. That includes companies like NVIDIA, Intel, and some of the other big giants. And somehow Bitmain made its way onto that list. Bitmain's obviously been a longtime supporter of TSMC and a buyer, but we also know that they're pretty small compared to people like Intel. So they managed to make their way onto that short list. I think, but I'm not 100% sure it's Jihan's side of Bitmain that's on that list. But it's still good news for them. They're the only manufacturer that has access to it. And so maybe we see an Antminer S20 or S21 come out in a year with 5 nanometer chip. And at the time, it looks like no other manufacturer will have that chip technology. So this could play in their favor a little bit here, as WhatsMiner, they took the first half of 2020. Let's see if Bitmain can, fight back a bit.
Yeah, I mean, So a couple of things, right? And I know I mentioned this to you before the show. WhatsMiner's not using a 5 nanometer right now. So at this stage, it's not irrelevant, but it's less relevant than it would otherwise be. There's still time to let the rest of the Bitmain drama play out. Although this would appear to signal that, I mean, Jihan's Bitmain is going to be moving forward in some way, right? I can't imagine that TSMC would have granted that chip allocation if there's like no prospect, right? If it was just they were going to sit idle when they could go to something else. And like, when is Bitmain going to be able to recover whatever is left of their image for this year? I think is a big question mark. But to your point, man, this is huge validation, right? Because all of the talk that we have and all of the negative press and all of it, right, is immediately wiped away when the biggest chip manufacturer in the world grants a unique allocation to the company that everyone else is assuming is just a heaping mess dumpster fire, which clearly they know something we don't, right? I just think it's huge positive news for Bitmain, and honestly, it's great for Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, I'd agree there. I think we have to come up with new names for Bitmain here. We can't keep referring it to like Jihan's Bitmain and Akreed Bitmain. You're gonna have to create 2 sub names here. What's the fork name? Bitmain Cat Jihan.
Bitmain Cat G. Now it's like, it sounds like a cheat code for a video game. Like, the more of these words that we add on, eventually it's just going to be somebody's private key, right? Like, it's a consecutive string of numbers and letters. I don't know, man. I don't know. I hope that they can clear it up and come to an understanding. I mean, that's a $15 billion company by some estimations. $15 billion. Jesus. Get it together, people. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money to be leaving on the table, right? Like, just take 7.5 each and be happy and give everyone what they need. Like, now's the time when miners need their shit. Let's get it to them. Like,
yeah.
Man, so
on that note, miners are struggling to get hardware. Like, the hardware markets are really on fire these days.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So if you want to share screen, let's take a look at hash rate index and the rig prices. Why don't you go through some of this?
Yeah, so we updated it again this week, and one of the interesting parts was actually the low gen miners, below 100 joules per terahash. Like, they saw a pretty hefty increase week over week in prices. If you can't get your hands on new machines, then where do you turn to? A lot of people that I talk to, I don't know about you, but they're like, I either get newest gen or old gen. There's like no in between. Either I'm getting it from manufacturer, or I'm picking up S9s for like dirt cheap.
Yep.
And so those gen machines saw a 5% increase in price week over week. S9s increased like over $10. So they're at 33 last update, and now they're at almost 45. That's pretty significant. And it really goes to show, like, you should never throw out miners. Maybe sell them when you think they're low, but like, always just store them. Like, don't scrap like an S9, because you never know when a bull run kicks in. These manufacturers can't keep up, and price outpaces hash rate, and so they increase in value, like we just saw here this past week.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've got cheap power, then you've ROI'd those machines many times over. If you were running an S9 for 3 years, right, you were in profit for a considerable part of that. Especially if you plugged it in at the right time. And so if you got the space, now look at it. You can put these things online, and they're making money. And I mean, I was talking to somebody who they're looking to pick up like a ton of S9s right now, just because it makes so much sense. And when you have these bottlenecks in distribution like they have right now with Bitmain, what are you going to do? I mean, you're not just going to sit on idle power when the price is pumping and you have the ability to plug something in and generate revenue. So it's a great point that you make, man. Yeah. Speaking of plugging things in and making revenue, right? Mara, the news came out that they have purchased 23 million in Antminers. that have arrived and that they are going to be plugging in the next couple of weeks. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It really goes to show like if you're not a huge buyer of rigs now, it's really hard to get in the queue for Bitmain and WhatsMiner. These machines are being bought out by large operations like Mara, Marathon Group, or like Corsair was in the news a few months ago. So it's making it hard to buy anything significant from manufacturers unless you have that relationship there. But if anything, that signals like barriers to entry. The guys who have been in the space for a long time, built relationships, been doing this, they're running their operations, they're going to have advantage over new entrants that want to come in and start buying machines. Well, get in the queue. So, Marathon Group, it looks like it was in that queue and has successfully kind of built those relationships.
Absolutely. And they're one of the publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies that continues to impress me. Oddly enough, as Bitcoin's price was picking up, a lot of my normie friends, that was their desire, desired exposure to Bitcoin, right? They wanted to buy some Marathon stock. They wanted to buy some of the Riot blockchain stock. And that's great. I think it brings positive attention. But the coolest thing is that it brings positive attention, but then you have companies like Marathon who are getting positive news like this, which just strengthens the positive image of Bitcoin. It's great because these guys are operating under a magnifying glass already because they're publicly traded. But then to just follow through and not only be transparent, but be making positive strides to grow and scale their business, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, the move to North America was not just like a meme. It's actually happening live. So I'm excited to see it happen. So like you said, Marathon Group said they were spending like 23 mil on new equipment, or they already have. That's on new gen. So that's like roughly the retail market's trading at like $25 a terahash now. I'm assuming they could probably get their price down to 20, if not lower. So kind of on the low end of like hash rate estimates, they could be at like 1.15 exahash after they install all these machines, which would put them, somewhere close to like 1% of the overall network, which is pretty exciting. They've their stock's been performing pretty well. It's had like a 250% run up over the past bit, and I'm sure your normie friends saw that and saw that they outperformed Bitcoin. So I think that valuation is quite interesting to see. As of today, they only had like 56 petahash installed. So if you take their kind of current market cap of 110 million, they're trading at roughly like 1.9 million per petahash, which obviously is like a little bit high. But if you then factor in, this new installation, then it can drop down to, around 90K per petahash. And right now a petahash, let's see, on our coin index here, a petahash makes around $97 a day. So 35K-ish a year. So, that's a pretty good valuation, I'd say, for Marathon Group now that they've bought those machines, and, they're probably setting them up as we speak.
Well, okay. No, hold on. Let's back up. Like, there's a massive disparity between 90,000 and 1.9 million. So first of all, how do you close that gap? Like, what creates that distance between those two numbers?
That multiple is really one I'm just kind of making up as we go here. But basically taking your market cap, which they're trading at like 110 million US dollars, and then dividing it by the amount of petahash installed, which I think as of recently was like 56 petahash. So you start to get to, over $1 million per petahash installed. And then so they close that gap by installing more petahash. You're basically increasing the denominator, so it lowers that metric. And so if they're trading at like 90K a petahash, that's about like 3 times revenue, which high for some industries, but not absurd, like the 1.7 million number.
Yeah, which is absurd, right? Like if 90 is realistic, then 1.7 million is crazy. Okay, interesting. So, I guess that could explain some of the correction in their stock price, which, we don't need to get too deep in the weeds with that. But I know on the news today, it was up a little bit. But
Yeah.
I mean, they're up like 250%, I think, over the last, month, 45 days. It's been a crazy rise. So I don't know, man. I like these stock prices are going. It's like with like I'm not putting Marathon and Northern Data in the same category, but Northern Data also had that crazy run up earlier this year, and there's been a correction since. Now, there's some other big news, and John at Difficulty Adjustment Hash Rates Weekly newsletter did a great job of covering this. We're going to talk a little bit about it, and that's Ethereum Classic. There was a 51% attack, which led to an investigation and the thought of charges being brought against the people. What's your take on all this?
John's newsletter is really good. I keep shilling his newsletter every week, but really, like, if you don't follow it, make sure you follow Difficulty Adjustment because he covered it really well. Somebody posted on Twitter, I think it was Zach from CoinDesk, was like, if you need lawyers to defend your blockchain, you don't have a good blockchain.
Yes.
And so I think, like, I look at this like Ethereum Classic thing. So they hired Combre and Kim for legal remedies and CipherTrace for criminal charges. Like, they're going and pursuing people, which I guess makes sense from a financial standpoint, but from like an ethos perspective, you need to be responsible for your own blockchain. You built it, you're shilling it to people as like something that's reliable, a public database that can be trusted. You need to ensure the proper security measures to actually, secure the blockchain and not allow that to happen. Like, that's why we're moving to the system, so that we don't have this type of event, or like if it does happen, that's because it signals a bad blockchain.
Okay. All right. Just question, what does Ethereum Classic do? Like, what's the use case? Yeah, exactly. Okay. I think we have our answer. Like, what are you spending money to defend? Right. I guess that's where I'm coming off. Like, when you think of a 51% attack, is it a bug or a feature? Is it something that miners should do if they're able to do it? Should it be deemed illegal or immoral? Like, there's so many questions that come up because of this. Like, how would the Bitcoin community have felt if someone would have 51% attacked BSV or BCH after the halving, right? Like, what would the sentiment have been? My guess is like jubilation, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, speaking to the ethos thing, this is just weak sauce. Like, the ETC move here is just Bush League bullshit. Like, this isn't crypto. This is the opposite of crypto. I mean, I don't know, they shouldn't have fired Charles Hoskinson as CEO if they wanted to just remain, a knockoff of something that's actually building. So
It is Bush League, yeah. Well, I think like 51% attack a network and attacking exchange is illegal, and you shouldn't do it. I mean, you're stealing money, so I don't think that that should be done. But as a blockchain to then go and start like trying to pursue everyone who may have been involved, like there was some like rumors circulating that they might pursue NiceHash for like giving out that hash rate. What are they going to then go to NVIDIA and be like, well, you provided the graphics cards, and then they're going to go to like Rogers and be like, well, you provided, or AT&T, you provided them the internet, and then go to like Stanford and be like, well, you provided them the computer science degree, and then sue their mother for like raising them in a way that they learned how to hack. Like how far are you going to go, right? Like, not every single person that's a part of this is involved. So I think like it's weak sauce, like you said. Like, Ethereum Classic, like they need to either like change their blockchain, their algorithm in some way that they like this doesn't happen. It's not new, right? This happened 2 years ago. Like what did you think was going to happen? Like they're getting attacked and they're not changing anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't that the sign of an abandoned project? I mean, look, it baffles me that people have had so much time to figure out these bugs and these kinks and fix things. And there's been basically 2 years where no one's paying attention, right? Like 2 years where you could have like done everything that you needed to fix it, and nothing is done. Like, why stay around? Like, I don't know. It's just like you're asking for this. It's like it's like the person who gets hot coffee at McDonald's and then intentionally spills it on themselves so they can sue McDonald's, right? Like, just go the fuck home, Roger. Like, this isn't, I don't know, man. This kind of stuff just makes me mad. It just,
Yeah.
I hope that this sets some positive precedents for how 51% attacks are handled. My worry is that this is, like you said, going to lead to a litany of things that just are a waste of time and resources for companies. Is NiceHash used for 51% attacks? All the time. Like, all the time. I would argue that, they're probably the biggest proponent of 51% attacks in the world, right? Because you can rent hash from them. Is that their fault? I don't think so, right? They're not encouraging people to use their hash rate for that. That just happens to be how it works sometimes. But there's also people that use that hash to provide, defense for their network when they're launching, right? There's other uses for that. And what if we get to a point where these 51% attacks lead to a place where you're not allowed to run hash rate anymore? Like, what that could very well happen from this, right? If it overcorrects, like we've talked about, and you go from having a situation where you can rent hash rate from a place, but now if you rent hash rate from there, it can be used for a 51% attack. Well, maybe they just make the rental of hash rate illegal.
Yeah. And then the next step is making the sale of machines that produce hash rate illegal.
Fuck, man. Jesus. Let's just skip to the part where everything goes to proof of stake, right? Like, you got it. Ethereum Classic, they get their way.
I think this is, like, although no one really cares about Ethereum Classic, I think it does highlight some really interesting game theory and parts of proof of work that can be attacked. And so for a long time, people, like, the ASIC versus GPU debate existed, and people were like, well, ASIC is more stronger for a network because of machine loyalty. But I think in an era where hash rate is freely traded, that kind of ASIC loyalty will diminish in purpose, or in significance rather, and things like algorithm dominance is going to become really important. Like, are you the heaviest chain on your network? And it's going to be a race to get hash rate on your chain. Like, can you get, hundreds of exahash if you're a SHA-256 chain? Because if you only have like 2 or 3 in an algorithm that has 150, that's going to be high risk.
Yeah. When do you think we're going to see some kind of movement on this? I mean, how long does something like this take? Weeks, months?
I think 18 months.
Any thoughts?
The landscape's going to look very different than it does today. And these attacks are going to become more frequent if exchanges don't kind of wake up and start defending the chains. Like, if you as an exchange want to offer some shitcoin like Ethereum Classic, part of doing business will be buying, like, options to buy hash rate if that attack comes up, so that you can outbid the attacker and not lose that coin. So it's going to get super interesting, man.
Well, speaking of super interesting, I mean, look, like, I these transitions, man, I gotta just stop trying to, like, the tie-ins here. Look, we got to talk about Ethereum. I think one of the biggest stories that is going on in mining right now is the fact that it is so freaking expensive to send Ethereum transactions, and miners are making bank. I mean, bank. For anyone who doesn't know, you're talking about like $2 per RX 580 a day in profit. I mean, I had friends giving away 580s in the spring, right? And now they're turning sick profits off of the fact that, I mean, ETH is banging it when it comes to those transaction fees. What's your take on all this, Ethan?
You and I hang out in both the, like, mining circles and the crypto Twitter circle. So a lot of people that probably listen to this, like, are on only the crypto Twitter circle. So all you'll see is, like, oh, high gas fees, you'll see the DeFi debates, all that stuff. But what you don't see on crypto Twitter is all these miners just over the course of a week are now getting 80% more profit for their hash rate. And a lot of those miners aren't on Twitter, so you don't really hear about that. But imagine if, like, SHA-256 mining went up 80% in a week, right? Like, that's pretty significant to Bitcoin mining operations. And that's what's happening on Ethereum right now. And so miners are just taking away from this. All this like hype, whether it's attacks, Ethereum Classic, or DeFi, at the end of the day, like miners are benefiting from this, behind the
It's true.
scenes.
I mean, it's crazy. Some of these transaction fees are nuts. The highest that I've seen is about $1,200 for one transaction. Um, and that is bananas when you think about it. And look, the thing with the DeFi hype and Uniswap and these liquidity pools is people are making so much money that they don't care what the transaction fees are. I mean, you're seeing people that are paying, double, triple digits in USD for these transaction fees just because they got to get their order through. They want to buy on one of these bonding curves. Like they are determined to place that order, and they've got to keep raising the gas to get it done. And it's funny. It's just it is crazy to me that after 2 years, the whole CryptoKitties fiasco was never really resolved either, right? Like ETH network still gets super congested, but these fees are nuts. These fees are nuts. Where do we go from here with this?
I think you follow this space a lot more closely than I do. But from like an outsider's perspective who hasn't spent too much time with ETH, it just looks like, how can you build on a platform where you're at the mercy of congestion on the network? You could build an unbelievably good dApp, and then suddenly like no one can use it because they have to pay $100 to get like one transaction through. Like it really makes the case of building your own blockchain, similar to like what Sia did, where they don't have to deal with any of this. You can go use the Sia cloud, like decentralized cloud storage, and you don't need to deal with high Ethereum gas prices. So that's the view I'm seeing, is like this clearly is a red flag in building like dApps on something that you don't control.
Yeah, and it's it doesn't lend itself very favorably to proof of work in this situation because, I mean, Ethereum is not a good is not proving to be a good example here. And what's happening is a lot of these new DeFi dApps that are launching and other products that are launching, they're launching on proof of stake protocols like, and I'm not going to name them, but there's others that are out there and much more prevalent, and we're seeing that move away from proof of work, and it's not good overall. I think that we need to have someone in the mining community kind of step up and champion that cause and look to find a way to marry DeFi with proof of work in a way that is scalable. Because right now, if everyone's just looking at ETH to do it, it's just not going to last. This isn't sustainable. You're already seeing the big players like FTX not electing to choose Ethereum and going with a different protocol, and that's going to keep occurring. So I don't know if anybody's listening out there and they want to find a way to get involved with DeFi, but they're a miner. Like, get a proof of work chain going on this and fast, because like otherwise it's just going to make the case that much stronger for ETH 2.0, which, who knows when they'll ever get around to launching that. But
I think I'm looking at that champion right now, buddy. I think
won't be me, sir. No DeFi for me. Nope. No thanks. No, I'm excited. Like Hashrate's got some positive news. We're growing. We've added an awesome member to our team today. Thomas Heller has joined. He sent out his official tweet earlier. We feel fortunate to have him, right? Like I think everyone in the industry knows Thomas. He's an amazing guy, very hard worker, incredibly talented, brings a ton of ideas, a ton of experience. And I mean, I feel fortunate to be working with him. I know the rest of the team does as well. But there's 0% chance that Hashrate goes DeFi. We got some big things we're working on. DeFi ain't one of them. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, congrats on that, man. Like Thomas is, for those that don't know Thomas, he's like probably one of the most knowledgeable guys I speak to in this space. He's like the blockchain for mining. He's like the single source of truth. So that guy's got his pulse on everything. He knows the entire stack, from obviously like being a mining pool operator, but he knows everything like collocations, facilities, standing up operations, financing. He's done some work with the Atomic Loans guys, so he touches on all the pieces in the mining space. So happy that he's joining your team and bullish on that.
Bullish. Us too, man. Us too. Well, Are there any other stories that we haven't covered yet? Is there anything that we're missing? I think that's all of the relevant news for this week. I could be wrong, but I gotta say, like I'm excited for the week ahead. This news this week, I think, is the most positive of the weeks that we've covered so far, and it appears to be trending that way. I'm hoping that there's more positive news that's going to be hitting us each and every week from here on out. Um, yeah, and Ethan, as always, man, thank you for helping to put on a good show.
Yeah, that was great. See you next week.
Yeah, will do. And to all of those viewers out there, thank you guys for tuning into Proof of News. Make sure that you smash that like button and subscribe to the channel so that you can catch Proof of News each and every week. For Ethan and I, we will talk to you guys again next Friday. Thanks for watching this episode of Proof of News, a Hashrate TV production. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more great content like this every day of the week. In addition, feel free to leave a comment below and let us know what you'd like to see discussed on the next episode of Proof of News. We'd love to hear from you. Also, if you head over to hashrate.com, you can sign up for our free weekly newsletter, Difficulty Adjustment. Every Wednesday morning, we provide you with the latest news and information on Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and mining. Plus, each week, one newsletter subscriber will be selected at random to receive a free Ledger Nano S cryptocurrency wallet. So go ahead and sign up today. Who knows? You may be the next lucky winner. Want more from Hashrate? Follow Hashrate TV on Twitter. It's the easiest way to keep track of our newest content all in one place. That's at HASHR8_TV. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you very soon. Please remember that all content appearing on this or any other Hashrate channel is strictly for informational and entertainment purposes only. You should not construe any such information as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. Consult a licensed financial advisor before investing yours or